What did you make of what Vivek Ramaswamy had to say just about their philosophy when it comes to cutting the government? I mean, is it reasonable within 2 years, that's their deadline, July 4th of 2027, I believe, the 250th anniversary of the U.S., that's the deadline. Is that realistic to make major cuts to the budget during that time?
I think it is, but I think, but what we need to understand is why is it so important? Why does Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have arguably the most important job under Trump 2.0? First of all, as you all know, at the end of next year, the Trump 2017 tax cuts are set to expire. And Trump knows he has to, if he wants to make them permanent, he has to pay for them. The problem is that with a debt to GDP ratio of 120% and deficit running at 6% of GDP and interest payment basically running at $1.1 trillion, he knows that the bond market will revolt and then things might get very counterproductive. And therefore, this is the reason why Trump needs to cut spending in order to roll over these tax cuts. This is the reason why, actually, in many ways, that Musk and Ramaswamy have been given an impossible mission, but it's a mission that's absolutely necessary in order to make Trump 2.0 a success.
All right. Really quick note, by the way, it's July 4th, 2026. I was doing some bad math, David. In general, when you look to cut things like entitlements or defense, is that realistic? I mean, that's such a part of the government's budget, I should say, that's been kind of seemed like it's in stone. And Emily just mentioned there are political consequences to cutting in those areas.
See, that's why the conversation today is going to be very interesting, because the math is very, very straightforward. I mean, there is no beating around the bush here. If you look at discretionary spending, it's about $1.7 trillion, right? If you take away defense, which is about $900 billion, you're left with about $900 billion of non-defense discretionary spending. Musk and Ramaswamy say they want to cut $500 billion a year. Guess what? That means cutting half of the $900 billion of non-defense, non-discretionary spending, and that would be crazy. That would be totally impossible. That's like firing half of basically all federal workers. That's just not politically not possible, and it's probably not going to make the economy more productive, more efficient in any event, which means the only way they can deliver $500 billion of cuts annually, which is what they're promising, is by going also after defense spending. There is no question that this is the reason why Trump is basically racing against the clock to stop the war in Ukraine. Because what he's up against, Trump realizes the only way he can touch defense spending is by, first of all, stopping the war in Ukraine, which has become a gravy train for defense contractors. This is why stopping the war in Ukraine is not just a foreign policy goal. It is absolutely central to Trump's basically economic agenda in 2025 and beyond.
So let's go back to the president-elect, his agenda, and also his philosophy. He's often considered the most Wall Street-minded president of all time. Something that I know you're saying that he's watching is not only the U.S. stock market, but the stock market in Argentina. Interesting enough, we actually talked about this on the show a couple months back. He had the Argentinian president, Javier Milei, visit him, and you're saying that there's some lessons they may be trying to learn from what he did down in Argentina, and also probably watching the fact that the Argentinian stock index has had tremendous growth since he's done it. Just give us that thesis as briefly as you can, because we got to go.
There's no question. I mean, Trump, Milei came in and cut spending. The most important thing is that what Milei did was that he reduced the budget deficit. Trump actually right now is inheriting a huge budget deficit from Biden. So from that point of view, if he wants to spend more, he first of all has to find ways to cut. And what I'm telling you is that, thank God for Argentina, it doesn't fight any wars. So it is not basically beholden to its defense contractors, like in this case, the U.S. The U.S. is spending $1 trillion on defense, fighting wars on many different fronts. And then we all know that the all-powerful military industrial complex is not going to give up without a fight. This is why, by the way, Trump actually, I think, dumped basically Haggard and started to and went with basically DeSantis, and DeSantis wants the job, because the only person who could actually stand up to the military defense contractors is basically probably someone with a political heavyweight like DeSantis. That's why DeSantis, by the way, is basically very bullish for U.S. Treasuries.